All right, Larry Krueger here at Levi's after training camp practice number 18, and today was a long, hot practice. Man, this one was long and it was hot. It was 2 hours easily. And it wasn't necessarily a great practice overall. I thought it was pretty sloppy. There were a lot of penalties. There were a lot of drops. There was a lack of focus. There were guys that one-handed things and just didn't look like they were mentally into it today. It happens, training camp's long, it's kind of drudgery. Once the games start, it becomes even that much more difficult to concentrate in the practices. But that was the primary takeaway, just long, hot practice and not a great one, kind of sloppy with lots of penalties and lots of guys looking like they were kind of gassed. Now, as far as who was in attendance, Jed York was here today, Alex Smith. We saw Joe Staley was in the house, Dante Whitner. Those guys don't always show up to practice, but they were all here today. As far as the key guy that didn't practice, Robert Beal Jr., who really needs to get out there. I mean, Beal's got a lot of talent, but man, he's got to practice and he's got to play. He's battling a hamstring, I believe, and he did not practice. The story of the practice, I thought, was Brock Purdy and the way he finished the practice. Now, the numbers don't look great. He was 12 of 21, threw a couple touchdowns, but he was super sharp late in the practice. He had a 4 or 5 play sequence in today's practice that was really spectacular, and I put it down in my notes, so I'll read it to you guys. They're in the red zone. They're running the red zone drill. He goes deep ball to Juice down the seam, and it was just a flat-out dime. Perfect, put it right on him. The crowd, everybody there kind of like gasped. It was such a nice play. Then after a Jordan Mason run, he throws a perfect slant to Ayuk, just an absolute dime to Ayuk. Then there was an in-cutting route to Chris Conley, hit him right in the hands, and then he finished it up with a touchdown pass to Debo in the corner, which was just a flat dime. So Purdy, as I said, for the day, 12 of 21. I think he had 3 or 4 touchdowns, but he was so sharp late. And to me, that was what really stood out about today's practice, was how sharp Brock was towards the end of practice. Now, Sam Darnold and Trey Lance had kind of, diametric opposite practices. Darnold finished 7 of 10, but he started off hot and kind of finished cold. He started 6 of 7 and then wound up, going 7 of 10. Trey Lance wound up going 4 of 8, but he started 0 for 4, and all four of his misses were high throws. I mean, he was throwing high balls that nobody was getting a hand on. I mean, he was overshooting the receiver by a ton today. A lot of in-cutting routes, a lot of slants, but I mean, just airmailing them with tons of velocity. I mean, the ball had a ton of velocity. It was coming out hot, but it was coming out hot and high. And so he started 0 for 4, but then he finished 4 for 4 because he went 4 for his last 4. So he went 4 for 8. Probably the worst pass Trey had was a screen pass that, once again, he threw way too hard for Ty Davis-Price. I mean, you're standing 5 feet away and you're just going to throw a bullet right at him. And he did, and he dropped it. So, but then later in the practice, Trey had 2 phenomenal plays. His best throw was a laser slant that he threw to the rookie tight end Cam Latu. He also connected with Anthony Miller in the flat on a perfect pass. So he had some really good passes late in the practice, but early he came out firing hard and just either was too much on it or way too high for his receivers. In some of the one-on-one receiving drills, which I was watching today, Anthony Miller, Braden Willis, and Cam Latu all look good. Latu, you can tell, is, he has been focusing on the fact that he's been dropping the ball. Now you'll see him catch it, and he'll catch it, and then he'll give it like a 1/1000, 2/1000. He'll pluck it with both hands, but then he doesn't catch it and put it away. He catches it, and it's like, I've got it. It's like he's really focusing on making the catch, and that actually is growth, because that's how it starts. I mean, it doesn't, obviously in a game you're going to tuck it away, but the first thing you got to do is make sure you're not catching it and looking upfield, catching it and running. you got to catch it for a full second with both hands, pluck it with your hands, and really concentrate. He was doing that today, and you could see it in the drills. Braden Willis, another guy, plucking the ball with his hands. Willis has not had the drop problems, but he looked good catching it today. And Anthony Miller. Anthony Miller, made a couple really nice catches. He's the newest 49er, former Memphis star who's kind of bounced around. But once upon a time, Anthony Miller was a second-round pick, and he showed some of that talent out here today. The practice was, I don't want to say marred, but highlighted, whatever you want to call it. I don't really care about these things that much, but obviously they get headlines. There was a brawl. It was a J.P. Mason run, and Fred Warner, got a little extra, just a little extra on the tackle, let's just say, and kind of threw Mason down a little bit, and then Mason kept running, and then he tried to go show second and third and fourth effort down the field against Lenoir, and they started bumping back and forth, and then before we knew it, Lenoir's throwing blows and Mason's throwing blows, and they had to separate it. It only lasted a second. It was the second play of the 11-on-11 drill, but just an example of when there's jobs on the line, the cut down's looming on the 29th. Everybody knows it. I'm sure they got the pep talk before the day. Hey, let's bring the energy and let's still get out there and compete. And Lenoir and Mason are both locked. I think both have a lock on roster spots. But nobody wants to get out hit. Nobody wants to get shown up. And you get a little testy on some of these long practices. And this was at the beginning of the practice. But, it's a hot day down here in Santa Clara. It was an afternoon practice. Most of the practices have been held in the morning. So maybe the heat of the day got to these guys. But Lenoir, man, he was letting those hands go on Mason. I don't know why you're throwing punches at a guy's helmet. But they were, man. They were going at it. They were both throwing blows. So that broke up, but that was kind of made the practice a little bit more spirited than usual. As far as other individuals who flashed today, Deshaun Jameson had a really nice PBU. Javon Hargrave had a nice sack of Brock Purdy. He looked pretty sharp. Javon Kinlaw tipped a Brock Purdy pass into the air and almost made an interception. And then Jack Coletto. Jack Coletto is looking pretty good too. He made a nice catch of a swing pass to the flat that was thrown by Sam Darnold, and Coletto's doing some nice things. It's like he needs to kind of build up his body a little bit. He's not quite as strong or as fast as he eventually will be, probably in a year. But there's a lot to like there, and you can see why they really like him and why they want to keep him on the practice squad. Mentally, he's really sharp. And he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and he's an efficient football player who just needs to work on developing his NFL body. He has a little bit more of a college football body than an NFL body. He needs to develop that. So we'll see. I would imagine next year at this time, Coletto is going to look really, really good if the Niners can make sure they keep him on the practice squad and not have him plucked away by another team. But there you go. There is the instant reaction to training camp practice number 18. There was a brawl. Purdy looked incredible at the end. And Robert Beal didn't practice. And there were some good points. There were some definitely good moments in this practice today. So a lot to discuss, a lot to break down. If you're watching this, make sure you check me out later today. I'll be on 95.7 The Game, stopping by with Mark Willard and Dan Dibley, kind of breaking down the day that was in 49er training camp practice. And thanks to Pig and a Pickle, by the way, for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California.